Hello, my name is Kathleen Park, and I'm a senior pre-sales manager at Laserfiche. Today, I'm going to be talking to you about Laserfiche and records management. For our conversation today, I'm going to start out by giving you a summary of the general benefits that the Laserfiche system can provide when it comes to helping your organization manage records of all types. Then we'll be going into a demonstration where I'll show you what the Laserfiche platform looks like and various ways that we can track record life cycles. We'll also take a look at some examples of how Laserfiche's automation tools can help streamline and automate various processes related to records management. And finally, we'll take a look at some of the reporting and auditing tools that come with the platform. Now, before we go into the demo, I want to introduce you to some of the general benefits that the Laserfiche solution can provide when it comes to how you manage records with your organization. To start off, the Laserfiche system is a general platform for managing documents and records of all different types, and it includes a set of automation tools that you can use to streamline various different types of actions across the entire record lifecycle. You can track records and documents through the entire set of stages that they follow as they are created, as they're actively used by the organization, all the way through to retention and when the records eventually need to be destroyed. The Laserfiche system is flexible, allowing you to organize records in a way that makes sense, both for the general users across the business and their day-to-day tasks, and for records managers who need to keep track of records organized by schedules and other policies. The system includes a granular set of security and auditing controls so that you can have governance, insight, visibility, and control over what users are able to see, what they can access and do related to content, and also being able to keep track of all the actions taking place in the system. Like I mentioned, Laserfiche has a set of automation tools and workflows that you can use alongside of records so that you can automatically apply the correct schedules and have records tied in to various types of automated workflows throughout the lifecycle of those records. Altogether, the Laserfiche platform can help support compliance and information governance for your organization, allowing you to more easily keep track of the record properties and schedules related to the content you're managing and help you comply with the various types of standards you need to follow. Now let's go ahead and take a look at a demo and see what the Laserfiche platform looks like. Right now on my screen, I have open to the Laserfiche repository. This is the core of the Laserfiche system, where you'll be able to store and manage content and records of all different types. Before we go into looking at the specific content and record properties, I want to give you an idea of how our screen is laid out. You can see that we have 3 panes available so that you can easily see the important information you need as you're navigating through. On the left-hand side is our navigation pane, where we can see at a glance the overall structure of the system. Now you can see here in the folder structure that Laserfiche has organized our content into folders based on the different groups, record types, and categories that we may have. Now, again, like I mentioned, the system is flexible, allowing you to have a structure that makes sense both for the general business and for records managers and retention schedules. Let's start out by taking a look at a specific example of a record that's been organized for easy access by the Human Resources team. So what I can do is go into the Human Resources folder, and if I want to look at an employee file type of record, I can come in to the Employee Files section. From here, I can see a list of records that fall into this particular category, and there's a few employee files I want to focus in on right now. Let's start by looking at this first record for Michaela Bruce's employee file. When I select that record, on the right-hand side, I can see the specific record information and properties that we're tracking. First, here at the top of the screen, you can see that we have a full visual of the life cycle and the timeline that this record has so far. So we can see the date when the record was first created, its filing date, and we can also see relevant events and actions that have taken place so far, and projecting into the future when that record will eventually become eligible for destruction. How does Laserfiche know what timeline this record should follow? Well, it's based off of the schedule and properties that have been applied. So looking further down to the bottom of this pane, we can see we have a retention schedule that's been applied to this record, telling the system that it should be retained for 5 years and then destroyed after that 5-year period has passed. We have that paired with a cutoff instruction. This is basically an instruction or a condition telling the system when the timer on that retention schedule should start. For a record like an employee file, we may have an event that takes place, like that employee leaving the organization, that will trigger that retention schedule. So in this case, we have an instruction saying that at the end of employment, we're going to have that 5-year retention period start. And in combination, this is where we can see that life cycle and those dates come into play. The record came in and was filed in 2022. The employee retired in 2025 and was cut off at that time. And based on that, in 5 years from that date, in 2030, that record will become eligible to be removed from the system. You can see all of this information directly alongside the records in this embedded pane in Laserfiche, giving records managers easy access and insight into the current status and history of that record directly within the viewer. Now, this particular record, like I mentioned, has already reached the point where that employee has left the organization and it's been cut off. That means that the record is now made read-only and is a little bit more locked down now that it's in that retention phase. So for example, if I wanted to come in and take a look at that record, if I tried to add more documents or remove documents, I can't do that because the record is already in retention. I can also take a look at the metadata, or in Laserfiche, the key information that we're tracking alongside that record. I can see it for reference, I can use it to search and locate the record, but I can't make changes to it because again, we've locked this record down now that it's reached its retention phase. Let's take a look at another example of a record, this time for a different employee for Cattell Cervantes. In this case, when I look at this person's record, again, we have the same retention schedule and cutoff instruction applied, but this is an active employee and they have not yet left the organization. So you can see the status is still in the active phase. And if I did want to come in, make changes to that record, if I wanted to add or remove content, I can do that because it's still in that active phase. Again, Laserfiche is going to allow you to keep track of records as they're being actively worked on and into the retention phase. Now, if we were going to be adding new records into this employees folder, let's say, for example, we wanted to do a performance evaluation and we're logging that here, I can create that document and immediately this record is going to have the retention schedule inherited from the employee's general file. So Laserfiche will automatically apply the appropriate retention schedule and cutoff instructions based on that record being imported into this employee's file. So this is one example of how we can organize records and automatically apply the appropriate retention policies. One thing that I want to call out here is that Laserfiche, with these record capabilities, tracking, and our auditing tools, which I'll touch on later, is designed to align with DoD 5015.2 record retention standards. Now let's go ahead and take a look at another example of a view that we can have for records and a different way we can organize our records. I want to point out that Laserfiche has the ability to set security based on the specific records in the system, but also based on folders or different sections of the system so that when users log in, they only see content that makes sense for their role. So far, I've been looking at this human resources section of the system, and we can set security so that when users log into the system in the HR department, those users are potentially going to have full access to this section of the system. Someone else logging in with a different role, they may not see that folder at all, so that the content is secure and role-based with the access, and also to tailor what users are able to see. So if I log in as a different user, you can see that this user has a very different view of content based on their role and the rights that have been assigned. In this case, they're not able to see all of those different business folders, but based on this person's role, let's say that they have a records management type of role, they do see these record series. Record series are another way that we can organize content in Laserfiche, specifically aligned with retention schedules that need to be applied based on different record types. You can see here that we have some top-level series organizing records based on different business units or departments. And if I go in, let's say, to finance, I can see that we further have divided this into series based on record type, one for business licenses, invoices, purchase orders, and so on. Now, if I take a look at one of these series, again, I can see that we have the retention schedule applied and a cutoff instruction applied. Now, the idea is that all records within this series will inherit and have the appropriate schedules added to them as soon as they are added into this series. Now, coming into invoices, these are a document type that will generally follow a time-based structure, most likely. So if I take a look at one of these particular records, these are organized into folders based on the year that these records were created. Now, selecting one of them, going to the right-hand side, again, I can see the life cycle, when the record was added to the system and the dates projected. And we have that retention schedule applied, but this time the cutoff instruction, rather than being tied to an event taking place, is tied to a time cycle, the end of that fiscal year when the records were added to the system. So this really just highlights the flexibility and options available in Laserfiche. You can create retention schedules for various different lengths of time. You can create cutoff instructions, both for events, time cycles, and other types of rules. And with those various components, you can combine them in ways that align with the record policies your organization needs to follow for your specific types of records. So up to this point, we've been looking at how we can view records directly in the system, and we've been looking at records that already have existed. But I want to take you through some examples of how we can add new items into the system and how Laserfiche's set of automation and data extraction tools can help us make sure the right retention schedules and record properties are applied automatically. So coming back into our main view here, let's say that we have some records that are going to be coming into the system from various different sources. Laserfiche can ingest all different types of content, including paper that might be scanned, including existing electronic files that may need to be imported into the system, files that may be coming from email, through integrations with other systems, and many other methods. Regardless of where that content originates, we can bring it into Laserfiche and centralize the tracking and records management. In this case, I'm just uploading 3 different documents into the central folder. Now we'll see in the background, behind the scenes, Laserfiche's workflow engine is going to pick up these documents and is going to do a little bit of review and analysis of these documents to categorize them into the appropriate record types and to apply the appropriate retention schedule. What's going to be happening is it's actually going to be reading the text from the documents themselves and using a set of tools, including one of Laserfiche's AI-powered features, Smart Fields, to identify the document category and classification and other information that's relevant to understand the right record properties to apply. We can see that some action has taken place, so let me refresh this folder. And sure enough, those documents are being picked up and moved on to the appropriate categorization and folder structure that makes sense for those record types. So let's go ahead and take a look at where those records have been moved. Since the system was able to automatically classify those document types, it's now moved them into appropriate folders based on that document type. The first document that we'll take a look at here is a purchasing agreement or a contract. Now, Laserfiche has automatically, based on the text in the document, been able to leverage our AI capabilities to understand that this document is a contract. We've applied the appropriate categorization. But more so for this, we can also see that we've applied the appropriate retention schedule. So for contracts, we happen to have a rule saying that those contracts will be retained for 7 years and then marked for archival at the end of that time period. And the instruction is based on the end date of that contract. Another example is going to be the student document that we imported, a transcript for John Doe. Taking a look at this document, we can see that we had a different schedule applied. Retain it for 5 years, destroying at the end of that time period, and the cutoff instruction, which makes sense for a student document, is going to have that time be triggered based on the end of the school year after their graduation date. And one final example, the invoice we uploaded. I'll take a look here. This invoice has had a retention schedule applied for 5 years and then destroy. But you can actually see, looking at the document, this invoice was first created back in 2022. Even though we uploaded it today in 2026, the date that we've marked for the filing date on this document, when we're going to basically be referring to for the retention schedule, this date has been backdated to the date written on the invoice. So Laserfiche was able to actually read that handwritten text from the document and use that to apply the appropriate date for the record lifecycle tracking so that we can accurately see that this record should be eligible for destruction in 2027. Now, these are just a couple of examples of how we can automate a process related to records when those records are first coming into the system. Laserfiche's automation tools can do so much more. We can have all kinds of different workflows, including reviews, approvals related to records, automatic notifications, automatically applying relevant event dates when the record reaches that point in the life cycle. So this is just a brief example of how Laserfiche's workflow can help automate processes related to records. Now, I want to show you a few of the different reporting tools that we have available to make it easier for records managers to find records they need to take action on and to take those appropriate actions. So far, I've been looking at individual items and showing you the record properties that we can see alongside. But for a records manager, they'll probably need to do a system-wide overview of what records need their attention. That's where we can come into the quick access view. Going into this view for a records manager, they can choose what records they want to filter and view. Records eligible for a certain action, for example, like disposition. Here I can see these are all the records currently that are eligible for us to destroy or archive from the system. I can look at an individual record, review and make sure that it's ready for me to take that action. And then finally, when I'm ready, I can come in and destroy. Now, I do want to point out that Laserfiche does not automatically delete or destroy documents from the system. Generally, for most organizations, you need that human review for that final destruction. And that's why we have the central view to show records that are eligible and ready for that action, but we still leave it to the human reviewer to make that final destroy action. So when I'm ready, I can come in and destroy. I also can come in, select multiple different records at a time, and take that action on the batch level. Now, I do want to point out that Laserfiche is able to retain metadata when a record is destroyed. So what that means is that if the record is removed, depending on the properties applied for that record, we can choose to either keep the details about that document as a stub in the system, or we can choose to have that removed as well. So in this case, if I choose to destroy and confirm, in this case, that record's metadata, the stubs, will be retained. So if I go into this record, take a look, I can see that that folder and all of the business licenses inside have been removed from the system. If I try to open one of those documents, it no longer exists. The file, the actual content has been removed. However, I can still see the history of the actions that took place, and I can still see the metadata details so that I can refer back and understand that this record did exist at one point in time. This record view is very useful for finding records that need immediate action, but we also have a number of other search capabilities to allow users to do more specific searching and filtering. So as a records manager, I can come in and I can filter searches based on a wide range of different record properties. For example, I can choose to search based on the disposition type, or based on the record retention schedule, or the cutoff instructions that are applied. In addition to being able to create my own searches ad hoc, I can also save criteria that I want to use again and again. And I've actually saved a search here to be able to locate records that will be eligible within a certain time frame. If I select that search and run this search, we can see that it's going to pull back a list of records that meet that criteria. And we can get very specific, finding records eligible within a certain date range, with a specific schedule, that reside in a certain location, so on and so forth. So this is really useful for me to get a various different types of views of content and understand what may need action within the system. One other tool that's available for reporting purposes is our audit reporting. This is going to give us a view into the actions that have been performed within the system related to various different types of records, not just what actions have been performed, but the timestamps, the user that took that action, and other details relevant to track. So here I'm filtering this report to show just actions taken related to records. I can see records that have been removed and when dates those took place. And this is going to give me visibility and insight into all the activity taking place within that system. Now, a couple of other things I want to briefly touch on related to records management. We also have the capability to apply holds to records so that if there's some sort of litigation or action taking place that we need to ensure that the records are not modified or removed, we can ensure that that takes place in the system. And we can use our search capabilities in Laserfiche to more easily locate records that need those holds applied. So for instance, let's say there's some litigation ongoing with one of our vendors. I need to search for all of the invoices related to that vendor in a certain time frame. And then I can select all of that vendor's documents and come in to add a hold. So in this case, I'll say there's some litigation ongoing. Apply that hold. I have a visual indicator applied, so I can see immediately that this record has a hold placed. And I can see that this record is now read-only. It can't be modified. And if I look at another one of these records, this particular item would have otherwise been eligible for us to remove from the system, but because it has a hold placed, I cannot remove it. I cannot destroy it until that hold has been removed. One final thing that I want to just briefly close with is the administrative view for records managers. Laserfiche provides a central and easy to use interface for people that are managing and creating record schedules, events, cycles, and other settings. So from here, I can easily see all of the items that have already been configured. And if I wanted to come in, for instance, to create a new retention schedule, all I need to do is choose to add that schedule, give it a name, tell it how long the records need to be retained. I can set the different types of retention, choose the various settings, even adding additional tracking if that record needs to be transferred, or if there's various events that may trigger an alternate schedule to be applied. All of those settings are available here. So the Laserfiche system is easy to use and intuitive, but also powerful, allowing you the flexibility to meet the specific needs for the different types of records that you may be tracking. So with that said, I want to come back to our slides. And like we talked about, and like we saw today in the demo, the Laserfiche system provides a number of benefits that can help your organization better manage your records, including full document lifecycle tracking from beginning to end, flexible options to organize records in a way that makes sense for all of the users in your system, granular security and auditing controls, giving you secure control and management over the actions taking place in the system, automation tools to ensure the appropriate retention policies are applied, and streamlining workflows related to records across the entire system. Overall, providing you the ability to support compliance and information governance for the records you're managing. With that being said, if you have more information you're interested in learning about, you can click on the screen here to access the latest resources about records management.